Hello, good morning. Um, my name is Daniel Blackburn, and this video is a response to some student questions about pollution coming from agriculture, namely the pollution coming from pesticides and fertilizers. So here on the screen I have the questions that Waad sent me, and he is concerned about the excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides. Now, about pesticides, I cannot help too much because it's not my area of research, but I can tell me about some of general knowledge things about pesticides, but mostly I can talk about what is the use of fertilizers, uh, what is the proper way of recommending fertilizers, what is the best sustainable strategy to avoid nutrient pollution in surface waters, like the Gulf of Oman, for example. So I will go now question by question, and then I will talk about these issues a little bit. So first of all, he starts with pesticides. So again, it's not my area, but I will do my best to answer these questions. So what is the recommended amount of pesticides and fertilizers that can be used safely? So the less you use of pesticides and fertilizers, the better. The least you use, the better. Okay, the least you use, the better. So pesticides should only be used when you really need them, not preventively. And if you know you need it, then you use it. And the fertilizers, the same rule apply. If you have enough fertility on the soil of a specific nutrient, there is no reason why you should be adding fertilizers. So in Oman, it is really evident that there's no soil testing happening for farmers. So the farmers are just overusing fertilizers. Recently, the use of fertilizers was over 1,000 kilograms per hectare, and now Oman is 15 on the world with 468 kilograms per hectare. This is data from 2016. But it varies year by year, and in average you would say that we have 700, 800 kilograms per hectare in the last decade or so. So yes, Oman is overusing fertilizers, and the type of these fertilizers is really, really important to distinguish which ones are the most dangerous, which ones are needed, which ones are not needed, which ones you can reduce by testing, and what would be the way you can safely use these fertilizers is a case-by-case explanation. Yeah, but I'll move to question number 2, and then I'll continue talking about the fertilizers in a bit. Question number 2 is about photochemical transformation of pesticides. So photochemical transformation stands for the oxidation and hydrolysis of organic molecules, which is often referred to the chemical reactions that are a consequence of the UV light being ionizing radiation. So the UV light is able to knock off electrons from organic molecules, and therefore it can cause oxidation of these organic molecules and then change the chemical nature. And if some pesticide it's exposed to the sunlight and undergoes this photochemical oxidation and transformation, hydrolysis, and then it means that it could be that the products of the degradation of these pesticides are no longer toxic to microbes and to humans. So when it reaches water bodies like the underlying aquifer of forms, it could be that these are no longer toxic. Photochemical oxidation or transformations are not the only way that you can degrade these pesticides in the environment. You have chemical reactions that also may occur, And the main thing that we should be looking at is the microbial degradation of these pesticides. Whenever these pesticides reach the soil, some pesticides have a really long half-life in soils, and some others have a very short half-life in soils, which means if they have a short half-life, they're quickly degraded in the soil environments. And these are the pesticides that we are looking. The safer use of pesticides are the ones that have a short life. If they are quickly degraded, that means they will not be, they're less likely to be a source of toxicity for humans later on. So yes, if you can choose the least recalcitrant pesticides, I think this is the better strategy for a sustainable use of pesticides. And you should only use when you really need it. So the way of avoiding excessive use is do not use it preventively by recommendation of salespeople. Just use it with the recommendation of a professional, an agronomist, consult an agronomist, and whenever you have a problem, and then you can deal with the problem specifically. In some cases, you need to do it preventively, but you always do it with the frequency and the dosage that you and the type of pesticides which are the least toxic ones. So you need to protect your investment in the crop, but you also need to be responsible to the environment, because being responsible to the environment means that you are keeping the natural resources for future generations. What do I mean by keeping the natural resources for future generation? It means that if we have nutrient pollution of the Gulf of Oman, at some point it could be that the whole Gulf is completely dead because of nutrient pollution. There's no fisheries anymore. There's no oxygen on the water, and therefore the activity of fisheries is completely affected negatively by the agriculture use of these fertilizers and pesticides. And the contamination of these waters also means that this could be toxic for humans. If we are using these aquifer waters for domestic use, that will be absolutely inappropriate if these aquifers are contaminated, especially from fertilizer with nitrate and with pesticides of any source. Depending on each toxicity would be more serious or not the problem with the pesticides. So question number 3 is, can we use pesticides that undergo photochemical transformation, which is non-toxic, in Oman, and why, and is it expensive? I think the cost, I wouldn't know how to answer this question, but because it's specifically regarding pesticides, and I think that it's case by case, whether is insecticide, fungicide, or nematocide, or whatever it is that you want to do with this pesticide. But you should always look to get information from an agronomist, and also there's so much information online now. You can Google specifically for each type of disease that your crop has or may have, and you can search for all the possible products that are available, and the least toxic ones could be easily found online, the information about these products, but it's always a case-by-case recommendation. And the cost should be taken into account, but you have to balance out also the responsibility towards society. Of course, the most toxic ones are already forbidden on the market, and you should always respect these restrictions from lawmakers. Even if it's allowed in Oman and it's forbidden elsewhere, you should take care not to use it, because you don't want to be have the responsibility of causing these health issues for society. So yes, agriculture is one of the main pollutant activities on the environment thus far. Question number 4: is it expensive to do the soil test to determine the type of fertilizers that is suitable for it? And do you recommend the solution for Omani? Yes, I do recommend this recommendation for Oman, and we've been doing some surveys in our labs, and what we find is the use of fertilizers is excessive. Yeah, it's already excessive. The use of chemical fertilizers. 80% of the farms, they are sufficient for phosphorus. For example, there's absolutely the majority of the farms, they do not need to apply more phosphorus fertilizer. The legacy fertilizer that there is on the soil would be enough for at least 10 years. And this is on average. Yeah? Some specific cases you need to do it more often. Potassium is highly variable, and it's harder to evaluate from soil testing, but our information is that the majority of the soils are already sufficient for potassium. But potassium is easier. There's less legacy potassium on the soil than phosphorus. Phosphorus is stabilized in soil. In Oman, because we have calcareous soils, the phosphorus is stabilized on the soil through adsorption processes and precipitation processes. The adsorption into carbonates and colloids, and the precipitation is usually with calcium molecules. So you have calcium phosphate, and you have phosphorus complex to calcium carbonates also in the soil. So this legacy phosphorus can be easily assessed by plants through the exudation of organic acids and the pH changes on the rhizosphere. And this legacy phosphorus is absolutely means that you don't need to apply phosphorus. So when farmers are using NPK, the majority of the cases, it means that the P on that formula is absolutely not needed. And also, phosphorus is one of the main sources of nutrient pollution in aquifers, into the Gulf. Yeah. So soil testing is absolutely worthwhile economically, because if you save in fertilizer, it automatically pays for the cost of testing, and you are avoiding this pollution. So for potassium and nitrogen, instead of just using like the farmers do, let's apply 300 kilograms per hectare now, and then another 300 later on. This is absolutely a bad strategy, a very bad strategy. So the way of going about recommendation of phosphorus is about testing the soil for Os and phosphorus. In the case of Oman, of calcareous soils, you should test Os and P and use that value. If you are above 20, you should not recommend phosphorus fertilizer. In the potassium and nitrogen, you should recommend based on the plant exports. Yeah, so the potassium in nitrogen, you will need less potassium than you need nitrogen, and so what I would recommend is, if you're not using any organic source of fertilizers, you should use at the start of your crop something like, if you don't need phosphorus, you should use like potassium nitrate, for example, and then you can top dress later on with urea to continue supplying nitrogen. But the amount of nitrogen and potassium can be calculated if you know the concentration of nitrogen and potassium in your crop export, and you know how much is the yield that you expect for the field in the year. Then you can easily calculate that, how much are you exporting. If you divide that exports by your efficiency, then you know how much you have to apply in your field in kilograms of nitrogen and potassium per hectare. So potassium you can give it all at the start of the crop cycle. And nitrogen, the more you split it, the better. Why? Because nitrogen in Omani soils, they're highly alkaline, and nitrogen is lost very easily and quickly from these soils because it's these alkaline conditions favor ammonium volatilization. Yeah. So when you use a nitrate source, also you avoid this the ammonium volatilization happening. But when you do it from urea is hydrolyzed into ammonium, and then this ammonium is highly likely that it will be lost for volatilization, especially with the high pHs, high temperatures, and surface application of these fertilizers. The deeper you apply, the cooler the climate is, and the less alkaline, you have less losses of these fertilizers to volatilization. Now, nitrate, on the other hand, you have leaching. And the leaching of nitrate will be very severe in Oman because you have very sandy soils. And they have low capacity of retaining these nutrients on the soil because of the low concentration of colloids, and among the colloids organic matter. Also, there's a very low concentration of organic matter. So this is the nitrate leaching will be a big problem, also an environmental problem. Yeah. So what is the main recommendation to deal with nitrate leaching is apply it fraction your application of nitrate fertilizers and nitrogen fertilizers as a whole, which means that you have to, if you have to apply 300 kilograms per hectare, you don't do it all the 300 at once. You do it in 3 or 4 doses. It will be much better for sustaining environmental level of available nitrogen for plants throughout the crop cycle and avoiding nutrient losses. That will increase your nutrient efficiency and decrease help your efficiency overall. Decrease the nutrient pollution of aquifers. So the other thing we have to make a difference between the nutrient pollution is that when you're talking about nitrogen and potassium, leaching is a high concern. So you have these nutrients are leached to the aquifer, and then through the aquifer they move. But when we talk about phosphorus, the main source of nutrient pollution from phosphorus is erosion. So because phosphorus is so much associated with the solid phase, phosphorus would not leach too much unless you have like ridiculous amount of phosphorus application. In some cases you have OSNP over 100, for example. In those cases, of course, you have some leaching of phosphate molecules, but the main concern of phosphorus will always be erosion. So the crop, the soil protection against erosion, either being wind erosion or water erosion, these are the main concerns, the main practices that the farmers need to take care of to avoid the losses of phosphorus and the contamination of waters with phosphate. Question number 5. Do you think organic fertilizers can reduce the pollution caused by chemical fertilizers? How can we make organic fertilizers at home? First of all, yes, organic fertilizers, they are very much useful in the nutrient management in many ways. They're, except for some studies on nitrate leaching, almost all the nutrient losses and nutrient pollution are reduced when you have organic farming, when you increase the use of organic fertilizers. The organic fertilizers, in a sense, you can think about them as an efficiency of the whole system, because you are recycling some organic waste that otherwise would go to the landfills. So if you are recycling this organic waste, it means that you are increasing the efficiency of the whole system. You're not losing the natural resources that are used to make the fertilizers in the first place. So the more you rationalize and have an efficient use of these nutrients, it means that the whole system is more effective, and you can decrease the overall losses and contamination of the environment with these chemicals. So phosphorus is coming from rock phosphate. The source of phosphorus fertilizers is rock phosphate. The source of potassium fertilizer is potash, is also rocks and minerals containing potassium. But the source of nitrogen fertilizer is atmospheric nitrogen. So there is an unlimited source of nitrogen for fertilizer use, but there is a limited source of potassium and phosphorus. Especially of phosphorus, we are highly concerned that within the next 300 years, we're going to have a shortage of the rock phosphate that is used to make the phosphate fertilizer. You know? So we have to take care about the overuse of phosphorus, not only due to the nutrient pollution, but also due to a issue with the source of this the phosphorus for making the fertilizers in the first place. So the more you use organic fertilizer, you will increase the efficiency of nutrients on the system. You'll be recycling these nutrients from the whole chain, the food chain, and then you reduce those losses. The use of organic fertilizers will increase the efficiency of the fertilizer in the soil, because you're adding colloids, organic colloids. It will improve the water usage. It will improve the physical properties of the soil. And by increasing the cation and anion exchange capacity of the soil, you will also improve the efficiency of the use of those chemical fertilizers that you complement with the organic fertilizer. So yes, the organic fertilizer will have a double effect. One, they are a source of the nutrients themselves, which have a slow release and prevent in many ways the contamination of the environment with the fertilizers. Secondly, the improvement of the chemical properties of the soil by the organic fertilizers also helps with the management and efficiency of the chemical fertilizers that you can apply later on. So the more you can use organic fertilizers, the better, in substitution for chemical fertilizers. And this is safe to say that is unless you are overusing it, like in some places where you have high production of manures and you are applying that to pastures, and unless you are really overusing the organic fertilizer, in general, they are safer to use than the chemical fertilizers. The problem with the organic fertilizers is that they're usually less concentrated, and they have a lot more cost to deploy and transport these and apply these fertilizers in the fields. And usually these organic fertilizers, they are applied nearby where they are produced. And because they are applied nearby where they are produced, it means that you have no excessive use in the regions where they are produced. And other regions which would need more, they are less commonly applied because there is a high cost of transportation of the organic fertilizers. The second part of the question about making fertilizer at home, I recommend this for everybody. I have my own compost pile in the back, either composting, vermicomposting, surface composting on raised beds. This is all very good strategies to increase recycling and increase the efficiency of these nutrient use throughout the full food chain. And of course, when you do it at home, it doesn't mean that it will be helping farmers, but it will be beneficial for home gardening, for example, and for the whole food chain and nutrient efficiency, minimizing the losses, increasing the recycling of these nutrients throughout the whole food chain. So question number 6, has Omani imposed any laws and penalties for farmers who use pesticides in huge quantities? Is there a monitoring committee to follow up on these violations? So actually, in Oman, I think there is not a lot of monitoring or penalties for overuse of fertilizers and pesticides. That is one of the reasons that is being overused at the moment. But for sure, there is regulation. I've searched online, and there is also an environmental regulations from Oman. They have some paragraphs that when you have projects and operations which might generate tangible pollution to the soil, such as pollution resulting from harmful substances or compounds discharged into the soil from the overuse of fertilizers and pesticides. So these need to be regulated and monitored, but this monitoring is handled to the project owners, not to some public institutions. So project in operations might lead to tangible deterioration of the soil or its dispersion. This is about soil erosion and soil loss. Yes, so all this is considered in the environmental legislation of Oman. But for sure, I don't think there is much being done to prevent this being happening. So this, at the moment, I think this is more about the conscience of each one of the business owners and producers, and then I think they are more concerned about profitability of their systems than about the environmental impacts of what they have. But there is a case to be made for these owners that if they use less fertilizers, if they use less pesticides, it's a cost reduction. You know, they don't need if they are convinced there is no need to apply it just to be on the safe side, then that could be for sure improve the outcome and the whole environment of Oman could benefit for a little bit more knowledge on these areas, a little bit more knowledge on the area. So our role at Sultan Qaboos University is to train the students so when they come out, they will go to the ministries, they will go to the market, and they will be able to do the proper calculations, the engineering calculations that will absolutely review for these business owners what is the efficiency of the system, how much should they be using, and even avoiding losses, not only the spending too much money on something that is wasteful, but also sometimes the excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers that can even be toxic to the same crops and unnecessary and being detrimental for their own profit. So having a little bit more knowledge on the system, it's beneficial, and our job at SQU is training these students so this next generation of technical assistants for this industry could be more responsible and leading to a safer environment in Oman. So I think that is all I had to contribute for this answer to these questions, and I hope that was helpful. Take care.